Welcome to Connecting the Dots, the official Securitas podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots. I'm Marina Amancio.
And I'm Carin Andersson, and we are your hosts for today. And today we have a very special guest. Welcome, Wim Bartsoen. Tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Wim?
Hello everyone. I'm Securitas Chief Digital Security Officer. I've been in this role for a little over 3 years now, and I'm responsible for both the definition and execution of the company's digital security strategy. You've kindly invited me here today. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
To talk about one of the objectives of that strategy, notably to ensure the company is cyber resilient.
Yes, but let's start from the basics here.
Please.
Right, exactly. What is exactly cybersecurity?
You want the correct or the intelligible answer?
I want both.
Okay. There are probably multiple definitions of cybersecurity floating around, but for all practical purposes, I define it as the practice of defending technology, in the broadest sense of the word, against digital threats. Now, there are 3 key words in that definition. The word practice indicates that it involves practitioners, that is people. It also suggests a certain way of doing things, so there's a notion of process, and ultimately the practice will have to rely on technology. The word technology covers systems and services ranging from the Fitbit on your arm or my arm, all the way to supercomputers in big data centers. Finally, digital threats. That's those events that can disrupt the normal operation of these systems and services and the data they process. But in much simpler terms, though, it's about making sure that the technology we increasingly rely on to conduct our business and our lives, that it doesn't get damagingly disrupted by willful or accidental act of sabotage or data theft.
I'm already getting a bit scared.
Right.
But what does cyber resilience mean then?
Well, cyber resilience is a strategic choice. It's a choice about how technology is defended against cyber threats. It's a choice based on the reality that bad things may and will happen at one point. It stands in stark contrast with an older and now obsolete paradigm, the one based on the illusion that all cyber threats can be prevented from ever happening. The strategic choice is important because it shifts focus and means from protection-only capabilities to detect and respond capabilities. Building cyber resilience means facing up to the reality of cyber threats, staying sanguine, and making sure you're ready to respond appropriately so that impacts are minimized and that you have the right capabilities in place for doing so. It's a choice that is also important for a wider group of stakeholders, inside and outside of the organization.
Yeah.
The expectation on IT and cybersecurity practitioners that all bad things can be stopped from happening, it doesn't hold in today's world. Unfortunately, bad things will happen. And it's a joint responsibility of all stakeholders, both within and outside of the organization, to deal with that reality, such that impacts are limited.
Yeah. And now that we know what cybersecurity is, and also that we need to have cyber resilience, I'm wondering here, why do bad things keep happening in cyber, though, all the time?
Yeah. I can imagine
Good one,
that's
Marina.
a difficult question. Well, maybe not a difficult question. I would say over the past 10 to 15 years, there's an ecology of cybercrime that has emerged, and which has led to a situation where techniques and tools for hacking have become a lot more accessible to a wider group of people. Computer hacking no longer needs a lot of skills to be combined in one person. Over the same time, our world economy has become a lot more technology-driven and digital. It's interconnected into a complex network of systems and applications, and with distributed responsibilities to protect them. And so this evolving context makes them a lot more difficult to really comprehensively protect. There's this inherent asymmetry that has grown a lot stronger. Systems are increasingly more difficult to comprehensively protect on the one hand. The stakes in case they are attacked have increased. And all the while, it has on average become a lot simpler to break into them and to make money off that break-in.
This sounds like a really serious problem and really hard to control. I mean, what can be done about it?
Well, a lot of improvements have been made over the past few years. Law enforcement across the globe, for instance, has really started to take this type of crime and threat seriously. Over the past few years, we've seen both indictments and arrests of high-profile cyber criminals. We've also seen increased collaboration across borders and increased capabilities among law enforcement people. For instance, today they have the ability to take down botnets, and they can even hack crypto phones used by criminals, allowing apprehending drug traffickers and other types of blue-collar crime.
They're hacking the hackers.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay.
No, it's remarkable.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, governments are also investing heavily in building institutional foundations in this space. For instance, by investing money in developing security frameworks, by mobilizing computer emergency response teams at the national level, teams that can help organizations deal with cyber incidents more effectively. A system with the protective capabilities as well. They're a bit like the fire brigade in the real world. They work both in supporting prevention, but also they're there to help when things go wrong. And that's a good role for government to play.
Yeah.
I think at a more supranational level, there is also an interesting renewed drive led by the United States and the European Union to establish some sort of consensus on rules of engagement, on red lines, borders that we all agree not to cross, such as, for instance, attacking healthcare or health support systems. The European Union has made information security a cornerstone of its multi-year digital strategy. So that's for the, let's say, the political side of things. On the technology side, we've seen the emergence of very powerful tools and services that help organizations to catch up with this problem. Awareness in the boardrooms of organizations across the world is really multiplied.
Good.
So I would say, let's not panic. Now, it's true that cyber threats are a challenge and that the risk is real. The problem will not magically go away if we wait long enough. We should stay confident about it and organize ourselves to deal with this relatively new and evolving reality. Applying the basics in terms of cyber hygiene can already go a long way towards reducing risk in this area. The basic cyber hygiene, for instance, will be very effective at keeping opportunistic actors out of your network.
Yeah, I want to get back to that cyber hygiene later on in the episode. But right now, my question is, how do you see the impacts of the pandemic on cybersecurity for companies?
The pandemic has really changed the way we work. And I think it has done so in an irreversible manner. We're not going to go back to our old ways of working, in my opinion. I think the pandemic, aside from the suffering it has caused worldwide, has really accelerated the digitization of how we work. And stay-at-home mandates have forced employers across the world to make it possible to work from home at an unprecedented scale. Digital collaboration tools and digital conferencing tools have been adopted at a pace and scale never seen before. The impact on cybersecurity of this is manifold, but let me pick 3 focal points out of that, 3 consequences in particular. I think for people, the fact that you sometimes can only work from home reduces interactions with colleagues to online meetings, email, and other digital communication means. And this increases the exposure to social engineering attacks, for example, phishing. Employers have mitigated this by spending enough effort and time on communication and awareness around these risks and by putting in place proper incident procedures in case something goes wrong. On the IT architecture side, many companies were not equipped to enable working from home at scale. For instance, capacity to remotely connect into the network, into the company network, may not have been scaled to the needs that universal work from home mandates create. The required secure authentication mechanisms were not in place. Remotely patching employee workstations is a challenge,
Right.
etc., etc. Many IT teams in many companies across the globe have worked really hard, have done exceptional work to adapt to these new circumstances and needs. For cybersecurity practitioners, in third place, you can no longer primarily rely on security mechanisms embedded in the company network, because people don't work there necessarily anymore. They work from home.
Yeah.
And so the focus in how you protect has shifted from the company network to the user's identity and the devices that they use. And this paradigm shift is not necessarily new, but it's certainly been accelerated a lot because of the pandemic.
Right. It's so interesting. I learned so much already, and we went through some basic but very complicated definitions surrounding cybersecurity.
And that we should not panic.
Right. That's the...
And we have learned, as you said, about the pandemic and effects of it. And now we're actually going into a short break, and we'll be right back to go deeper into this and talk about what Securitas has to do with cybersecurity.
Right. Okay.
Be right back.
Remember Mike Evans from episode 3? Well, he leads the Securitas Intelligence Unit, and a couple of weeks ago, they won an award for risk management innovation. The 12th CIR Risk Management Awards celebrates excellence in risk management. And throughout the pandemic, the SIU provided a range of intelligence products and services to businesses of all sizes across diverse sectors, giving them the insight and confidence to make decisions to not only manage risk to their business, but also create and realize opportunities. The award demonstrates the impact of the SIU's response to COVID-19 and deserved a shout out in our podcast. Congratulations to the team.
And we're back. Now let's do a little bit of a deep dive with Securitas and cybersecurity, since that's what we're talking about. So I know that since Q4 2020, Securitas has a responsible disclosure policy. So Wim, what is that and why do we need it?
It's a very useful instrument for us. Responsible disclosure is a mechanism that allows well-meaning independent security researchers, so people that don't necessarily work for us, but that are out there and that do research, to disclose a weakness or vulnerability that they find in a Securitas system or service that we expose on the internet. Depending on the criticality of their finding and the quality of their reporting, they can collect a meaningful reward for their efforts. It's a practice that has become increasingly common among organizations that want to act responsibly in this space, and one which I truly hope will become standard practice across industries. It's based on the premise that any complex IT environment will always have vulnerabilities and configuration mistakes that slip through the net of good IT due diligence and vulnerability management practices. A responsible disclosure program catches these in a structured manner, and it allows an organization to address them in consultation with the people that found the problem. Typically, in the space of about 3 months after notification, such disclosed problems typically get solved. And it's a win-win situation. Independent security researchers get a safe and rewarding way to do the right thing. And Securitas can further optimize its vulnerability management practices, reducing risk to its operations and its clients.
Wow.
That sounds really good.
Right?
As part of the digital security strategy here at Securitas, we're running a program called Cyber Resilience Program. What is that?
The Cyber Resilience Program is a significant multi-year and organization-wide effort to ensure that all the entities of the Securitas Group are lifted up to the right level of cyber resilience. Cyber resilience in the sense of the strategic choice we discussed at the start of the podcast.
Yeah.
The program agenda is based on a periodically reviewed analysis of common cyber threats that then drive the definition and implementation of targeted operational, IT and security controls in all the group's entities. All of this is underpinned with a measurement system, which we call the cyber resilience metric, and which rolls up the operational performance of these controls into a simple per entity grade that clarifies to business management of the entity where it stands in terms of its cyber resilience.
All right. And before the break, you mentioned the basic cyber hygiene can go a long way to reduce risk. Can you explain a little bit of what are these basic what is basic cyber hygiene? What do you mean with that?
Well, let me start with a preliminary remark. Cyber hygiene is a joint responsibility. The dots need to be connected, as it were.
I see what you did there.
It requires that all of us take responsibility at an individual level, at an organizational level, but also at the government level, to ensure we keep things secure and working well for everyone. This is not going to be exhaustive, but there are a few pointers at an individual level, for organizations and for governments, that I can talk about. For us, at a personal level, I think about cyber hygiene in terms of what I would call the 6 commandments.
Wow.
The first one would be to stop and think before you act. There will always be a small but annoying minority of people that want to fool us on the internet. They have the advantage of being able to try that at scale and with a lot less risk than in the physical world, because they're at a distance and because they can target many people at the same time.
Yeah, scary.
It's useful to be aware of that and to stop and think before you click. To challenge your own assumptions of authenticity, if I can call it like that. The second focal point is, or commandment, if you will, is to protect your identity. Protect your credentials. Use things like multi-factor authentication where you can. And be careful with the privacy settings on social media. Be aware that there have been numerous cases of personal data having been breached or abused, made available through social media.
Yeah.
So not arguing for not being on social media, but be aware and make choices consciously about what you publish there.
Very good.
A third commandment is to protect your device. And these days, for instance, your smartphone holds a lot of valuable and confidential data on you. Make sure you properly protect that. Turn on the automatic lock feature and take a backup and factory reset it before you hand it in for repairs, because the people that repair your device, well, they'll have access to all the data that's stored on it.
Yes.
If you don't want that, then it makes sense to factory reset it before you hand it in. A fourth commandment, between brackets, is to protect your data. Don't leave your data trailing around. Know where you've stored it and remove it when it's no longer needed. For instance, from online services that you no longer use. Remember to protect access to it and always make backups as an extra security precaution against adversarial events. A good example in that space, may have picked it up as well, is people that have invested in crypto coins and that lost the data that gave them access to their wallets, and which resulted, in the case of people holding bitcoins in their wallet, to a multi-billion-dollar loss.
Oh my God.
Because the investment had accrued so much value and they lost the data, giving them access to the wallet. It's a pity.
Wow.
Fifth focal point is to report incidents. If something goes wrong or you've been hacked, don't be ashamed about it, but report it so you can get the help you need. And then finally, stay vigilant and maintain awareness of how cyber criminals continuously try to take advantage of people and what are their methods, how do they do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Back to that panic mode again.
Yeah, but also just extremely aware now, just always thinking
this is
twice.
really interesting and really good. Thank you for sharing. This is what we can do as individuals, right? These 6 commandments, I will try to remember them. But what does basic cyber hygiene mean for Securitas?
Yes, a company,
Well, for Securitas, as for any organization, basically, basic cyber hygiene is that subset of security measures that adequately protects against opportunistic threats. And with opportunistic threats, I mean people that exploit vulnerabilities without wanting to put in a lot of effort. we base ourselves for the basic security hygiene definition on the so-called critical security controls published by the Center for Internet Security. They have defined basic cyber hygiene for organizations as a first so-called implementation group of controls that are fully specified out. Discussing them in meaningful detail is worth its own set of podcasts, probably for a more specialist audience. But there are excellent resources available on the internet for this. There's currently a version 8 of this control specification. It's 18 controls, each with a set of or subset of safeguards. And then basic cyber hygiene is the minimum subset of safeguards for each control to be in place.
Now, a final question. This is our last question of this episode, because I have to ask this, Wim. Are we exposing ourselves by having a podcast episode about this topic?
Well, I would hope not. No, I mean, cybersecurity is too important and relevant a topic these days to keep mum about. Not just for Securitas, for pretty much any organization that uses technology. And I think it deserves a richer debate than the dominant voice of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and delusion that too often dominates the news cycle. I think we should steer away from what you could call schadenfreude and blame the victim impulse. I hope here and now to have been able to make a little contribution to that debate by sharing my views on where we stand and what I think we should do. And I hope that our listeners find it useful in the sense that they come away with a sense that cyber risk can be managed, that it is manageable.
Yes, they have 6 commandments to follow, so they know. You all know now.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wim.
Thank you so much. This has been really interesting.
Right.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
It was a pleasure.
But it's not over yet.
No. We want to play the
connection game.
And if you have listened to our podcast before, you know what that means. And Wim, we will say 3 words to you. And you will say the first thing that pops up in your head when we say those words.
Okay.
Whatever that is. And the first word is cash.
Cash is in money.
Yeah, exactly.
Trouble.
Okay. The next word is beach.
Not breach.
Beach. Good one.
1 letter difference, but a world of difference in meaning, right? Summer.
Good. As is not today.
Not now. Yeah.
Here,
not now.
And the last word I had to pick this, and the last word is galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to it.
Nice. Don't panic.
I confess to being a nerd.
I love it.
But proud of it.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much for joining our podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Good.
Thank you so much for listening in too. And I guess we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah.
And the next year too.
Next year too, yes.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.